They didn't just leave my name off the funeral program. They erased me from my father's legacy. My name's Odellyn Kavanaugh. Some people knew me as the co-founder of Kavanaugh Labs. But on the day they lowered my father into the ground, I was just no one. A shadow in a room full of applause. Not even a mention in the printed tribute. Not a daughter. Not a partner. Not even a footnote. I parked 3 blocks away from the memorial center. Not because there wasn't parking, but because I needed the walk. The sky was this heavy gray, the kind that doesn't rain but still soaks you in silence. The kind that felt right for the occasion. As I got closer, the welcome board came into view. Thomas Kavanaugh, A Life Remembered. Hosts listed underneath, Seraphine Kavanaugh and family. That was it. No mention of a second daughter. Not even the vague courtesy of survived by 2 children. Inside, the lighting was soft, intentional. The kind designed to make grief look elegant. I stood still for a moment, just long enough to feel how out of place I was. The first person who noticed me looked the way you do when you run into someone from high school you can't quite name. A polite smile, then a glance back at her phone. A young woman with a clipboard approached. "Hi, do you need help finding your seat?" Her voice was practiced, smooth. I nodded. "I think I'm in the family section." I said it without flinching. She scanned the list, paused. Her eyebrows tightened just a hair. "The Kavanaugh party is Rouse, 1 through 3, she said, then hesitated. "But you're not on this list." She looked up. I didn't blink. "It's fine. Just show me to any open seat." She gestured to an usher, who led me to a side aisle row, not too far back, but far enough. A silver sign on one seat in front of me read, "Reserved." The usher hesitated, then, without saying a word, removed it. Someone else sat down a moment later. That seat said everything. The ceremony began with soft music and a slideshow. Picture after picture of my father shaking hands with mayors, golfing with venture capitalists, posing at ribbon cuttings. Not a single photo of him teaching me how to check my tire pressure when I was 16. Not one of us getting gas station tacos after a long workday. Just the polished legacy, not the real man, not the one I knew. Then came Seraphine. She walked to the podium like it was built for her. Black dress tailored to precision. Her voice rang out strong, clear. "My father believed in work, in vision, in legacy," she said. "And as the CEO of the company he built, I promise that vision will live on." Not once did she say my name. She thanked our family, our team, our investors. She called Dad her compass. She called the company their shared dream. The audience clapped like they'd just watched a keynote speech. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Just folded my hands in my lap and watched my story get rewritten. One man near the front, a construction buddy of Dad's from the early days, looked back at me. His brows pulled tight like maybe something wasn't sitting right. Maybe he remembered. But then he looked away, just like the rest of them. After the final hymn, I slipped out to the reception hall. A few people nodded, politely. I didn't stay long. I ducked into a side hallway near the exit, somewhere quiet. I pulled out my phone. 5 unread emails. One caught my eye. It was forwarded to my old company email. The one I'd forgotten still bounced to my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Champagne tonight." And the message inside said, "She finally has it all. No more loose ends. Dad's out and O's out. Clean slate. Pop the champagne." It was meant for Seraphine's team, sent by her executive assistant. The same girl I trained fresh out of undergrad. 3 years ago, I didn't feel shocked, just hollow, like my brain already knew and had filed it away somewhere, quietly. I hit forward, sent it to myself. Changed the subject line to one word. Keep. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't demand an explanation. I just stood there next to a blown-up portrait of my father with a quote underneath that read, "Success demands sacrifice. Loyalty is everything." None of those words were his. Not really. Just phrases someone picked for the mood board. A child ran past, chasing a balloon. The string slipped. I watched it rise, slow and aimless, up toward the light. For 1 second, I wished I were that balloon. Just gone. Instead, I whispered, barely audible, "They didn't just bury him today. They buried me too." And that was when I knew. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being erased, quietly, beautifully, like I'd never existed in the first place. The inheritance announcement came just 6 days after the funeral. No moment to grieve, no breath to process. It felt less like closure and more like a boardroom. Update, polished, efficient, cold. The kind of cold you feel in your bones, even when you're dressed for it. I got there early, out of habit, not hope. Walked up the back stairwell instead of taking the glass elevator. Same one I used to take when I wanted to avoid the PR team on launch days. It was quiet. Too quiet. Like the silence that comes after everyone's already decided where you belong. And it's not here. The conference room looked exactly the same as it did during quarterly reviews. Polished walnut table. A water pitcher placed perfectly in the center. A monitor looping through photos of my father, posing with senators, breaking ground on new buildings, laughing with investors. The public man. Not the father who used to sneak tacos into board meetings just to mess with the catering staff. I was directed to a seat at the far end of the table. Not beside my sister. Not beside legal. Just out of the way. The chair felt too upright, like even the furniture knew I wasn't supposed to settle in. Cassian, our family's counsel, stood. He cleared his throat like he was about to deliver. "A shareholder update, per the wishes of Thomas Kavanaugh," he began. "And under the authority of the revised will filed 6 months prior." 6 months. The following allocations are to be made. I already knew. I think I knew the second I walked in and didn't see my name on a single folder. The primary equity holdings, liquid accounts, and voting control of Kavanaugh Development Group shall transfer to Seraphine Kavanaugh, including all subsidiaries and media rights. I looked across the table at my sister. Her hands were folded in her lap. She nodded slowly. Calm, polished, like someone accepting a humanitarian award. Cassian continued. "Odellin Kavanaugh shall receive a framed portrait in memory of Thomas, a personalized letter, and a one-time honorarium of $50,000. There was a beat of silence. Then, oddly, applause. Not from everyone, but enough. Some of the board members clapped, like they'd just witnessed something noble, something clean. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. After everyone began filing out, Cassian lingered. "Odellin," he said quietly, "do you have a moment?" I followed him to a side office. It was small, quiet. He closed the door behind us and pulled out a document, sliding it across the desk. It was familiar. My signature was on the bottom, dated 3 years ago. Limited power of attorney, the header read. Transfer for internal reallocation, KDG Holdings LLC. I stared at it. "I remember this," I said. "She said it was temporary, just for the Texark merger, legal coverage while she handled the filings." Cassian nodded. "It should have been temporary, but the document wasn't time-bound. And recently it was updated with an addendum. That change made it permanent." I looked up. "Who added it?" He hesitated. "It was filed under her authority, Seraphine's team." I leaned back in the chair, felt the air leave my lungs all at once. like steam off a forgotten cup of tea. She didn't just take it, I said. She used my hand to do it. Cassian didn't respond. He didn't need to. Outside the office, the sunlight stretched long shadows down the hallway. I walked out holding the paper. On the receptionist's counter was the framed photo they'd left for me. Dad and I at the beach. I don't even remember what beach it was now. I just remember the way he looked at me. His arm over my shoulder, like I was still the future. I placed the photo gently in the backseat of my car, face down. Inside, I opened my phone, took a screenshot of the updated POA document, created a new folder, named it Truth Not Tears. That name wasn't just for files. It was a promise. No more crying in parking lots. No more trying to explain myself to people who already decided I was optional. No more letting Seraphine play God with my name. As I clicked my seatbelt into place, I remembered the day I signed that document. Sitting on the patio, spring sun, tea in mismatched cups, her handing me the pen. Just a formality, she'd said. You trust me, right? I had. That would never happen again. The silence after betrayal isn't empty. It hums. It circles. You like a low, invisible drone. And right then, in the stillness of my car, I could feel it rising. Quiet, but getting louder. 2 weeks after the will was read, I found myself stepping out of a black car in front of a marble glass venue in San Francisco's Marina District, the kind of place where tributes look like tech conferences. The invitation hadn't come from the company. It came from an old colleague, one of the few still decent enough to say, "You should be there." Inside, everything gleamed. Uplighting, champagne trays, towering floral displays. Photos of Dad from every era lined the walls, him with a shovel at the first groundbreaking cutting ribbons, signing deals, standing with donors, all of it perfectly staged. The caption under one of them read "Legacy through Innovation." I moved through the crowd slowly, unnoticed. Or maybe just unacknowledged. That's how it works, doesn't it? People see you, but pretend you're just another guest. A ghost dressed up for optics. I glanced at the printed program folded neatly on each seat. Seraphine's face was on the back cover. The tribute video would start at 7:10, her keynote right after. I was seated near the back, next to an assistant who kept checking her smartwatch like the time owed her something. My mother sat beside me, lips pressed together. She hadn't said much since the will, but that wasn't confusion. It was habit. Silence was her shield. At exactly 7:10, the lights dimmed and soft piano chords played. The screen came to life. It started with Dad in his early years, helmet on, sleeves rolled up, shaking hands with local officials. Then came Seraphine, beside him in every major shot, at summits, at builds, in meetings, narrating in this smooth, practiced voice that sounded familiar for a reason, because I wrote that speech, or at least the version she was now delivering. Then came the part that made my breath hitch, a clip from a pivotal pitch we gave years ago, the one that changed everything. The one where investors finally saw us as more than a family project. But this version, I wasn't in it. I had stood next to her on that stage. I had delivered the final lines. But in this edit, I was cropped out. My voice replaced with hers, my body erased, like I'd never existed at all. The room clapped. At the next table, a woman turned to me, half curious, half hesitant. "Weren't you in that pitch too?" she asked. I didn't smile. "I wrote that speech." Her eyebrows lifted, slightly. That was it. No apology. No outrage. Just, huh. Seraphine stood to speak. The lights caught her gown, her jewelry, her teeth. She looked like someone carved out of glass and certainty. "I thank everyone who helped build this dream with me," she said, pausing just enough to draw attention. "And especially those who stepped aside so others could lead." The room clapped again. A few people glanced toward my section. I kept my face still. I hadn't stepped aside. I had been nudged, slowly, then fully, out of the frame. And now they were acting like it was a gift I'd given. After the applause, I stood. My mother followed. We walked past champagne flutes, camera flashes, and framed posters quoting things Dad never actually said. Outside, the wind off the bay cut sharp through the silk of my dress. My mother lit a cigarette, something I hadn't seen her do in years. "You know," she said softly. "Maybe it's just the way things work now. You chose your path." I turned to her. The streetlights cast a pale glow over her face. "I didn't walk away," I said. "I was pushed, quietly, and applauded for it." She didn't argue, just took another drag and stared straight ahead, like she wasn't part of any of it. We stood like that for a while. Two women, bound by silence, standing outside the story they were both supposed to be in. Later that night, I lay in bed with the lights off, eyes wide open, replaying her speech. In my head, every word I'd written twisted into a narrative that no longer had space for me. They didn't just crop me out of a photo. They edited the record, and now I couldn't unsee it. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was watching. Closely. Quietly. And the quiet part of me, the one they thought would stay buried, she was starting to sharpen. A week after the gala, a cream-colored envelope arrived by courier. No logo, no return address, just a crisp card inside with embossed gold lettering. It read, "We'd love your voice at the Legacy Roundtable. Celebrating vision. Honoring unity." Signed by someone named Bexley Torres, the new chief marketing officer at Kavanaugh Systems. I'd never met Bexley, but I knew the type. The kind who spoke in taglines. The kind who smiled with their whole face but never their eyes. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 11, inside one of the old Palo Alto conference suites. The same building where I once pulled 30-hour coding marathons. Where I built the prototype that launched our first platform. Now I was returning as what? A symbol? A prop? I arrived 5 minutes early. Bexley met me at the entrance with a bright grin and an overly warm handshake. "Oh, Dylan, it's so great you could make time," she said, like we were old friends. "Your presence, your energy, is vital." The room smelled like lemon water and nervous ambition. 6 people sat around a long glass table, young, stylish, unknown to me. At the far end, Seraphine walked in, of course last. She was dressed in white again. She always wears white now. Clean lines, sharp collar, a walking press release. She gave me a soft smile. The kind that says, "You don't know it yet, but you've already helped me." Bexley clicked the remote, and a slide deck appeared on the screen. The Kavanaugh Legacy, Sisters, and Vision. "We're framing next quarter's campaign around family and innovation," she began. "We want to highlight the bond that built this empire, the handoff, the unity." The slides showed mock-ups, me and Seraphine in coordinated coats on rooftops walking side by side. Headlines underneath, "Passing the torch was always part of the dream." I didn't speak. I just stared at the draft press release in front of me. It called me a founding consultant. No voting power, no ownership, just a title with no teeth. A name with no voice. Then came the quote. Attributed to me. Handing the torch was always part of the plan. Legacy means knowing when to step back. I looked up slowly. "You want me to smile for the camera while holding a story that isn't mine anymore?" My voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It just landed. Bexley blinked. "We just think it's important your legacy doesn't go unrecognized," Seraphine added gently. "This keeps you visible. You'll be honored as the bridge to now." "The bridge that gets walked over," I said, folding the folder shut. A long pause followed. Then Beaksley cleared her throat and said, "Of course, all participation is voluntary. But we believe this could be healing. For the public. For you. Healing. That word they use when they want you to be grateful for being erased politely. I didn't stay for the photo op. I didn't even go home. I drove straight to Cassian's office. He looked older than I remembered. His eyes didn't quite meet mine when he let me in. "I need to know the truth," I said before he could even offer coffee. "Was I ever in the revised will? Did my father intend to leave me anything?" He let out a long breath, walked to a file cabinet, and pulled out a folder, unmarked, thin. He laid it on the table in front of me and opened it slowly. Inside was a draft will, not the final one that had been filed. This one had my name on it, equal shares, a charitable trust I'd pushed for years ago. Dated 30 days before Dad was hospitalized. "It was never signed," Cassian said quietly. "It was an early version." "Why wasn't it finalized?" I asked. He looked down. "Seraphine submitted the final version for notarization 2 days before your father was admitted. She said she had power of attorney." "And he approved it?" "I don't know. The notary was private. I only saw it once it was filed." Sat there staring at my name in black ink. It wasn't crossed out. It wasn't missing. It had just been overwritten. This wasn't some family misunderstanding. This wasn't grief making people act out of character. This was deliberate. She didn't betray me. She executed a strategy, and I had let her play the long game with my trust. But now, I was wide awake. It was 3:47 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I was already half awake, staring into the dark, not really sleeping, just drifting. I reached for the screen, expecting spam or another missed call from a number I didn't recognize. But there it was, no subject line, no sender. Just an attachment titled, "Dad Final Draft 3 PDF. My first instinct was to ignore it. Scam, maybe. Or worse, someone playing games. But my thumb tapped anyway. The file opened slow. The glow from the screen lit up my blanket in this cold, pale blue. It was scanned unevenly, like whoever had sent it was in a rush. But the signature, that was real. My father's handwriting was in the margins, ink slightly smudged in places. And there, at the bottom of the last page, one line circled in blue pen. "O'Dellin will take care of it. The right way." The will was dated 30 days before he went into the hospital. It listed both me and Seraphine as equal beneficiaries. It included the trust, the foundations, everything we'd talked about on that patio over tea, months before any of this exploded. He had changed it. He hadn't forgotten me. He had trusted me. Someone else had made sure that version never saw daylight. I didn't cry. I just sat there, phone glowing like a quiet heartbeat in my hand, and let the weight of it settle into my bones. By sunrise, I was tearing through old filing boxes in the hall closet. Ones I hadn't touched in years. Some still smelled like hotel coffee and printer toner. I flipped through project notes, scribbled timelines, meeting transcripts from the early pitch days. There, in a folder marked Founding Equity, Internal, Use, I found a document signed by Dad. It named me as co-founder, with initial allocation figures in his handwriting. It wasn't enough to take to court. Not yet. But it was a thread, and I was ready to pull it. By 7:30, I was sitting at the kitchen table in a sweater too big and socks that didn't match. I stared at the note I'd scribbled the night before. This isn't for revenge. This is for realignment. Then I grabbed my phone and typed in a number I hadn't called in years. Marcellus James, Logistics Director. My father's right hand before Seraphine restructured the entire executive team. He picked up on the second ring. "O'Dellin," he said. That Arizona drawl I hadn't heard in forever, steady and unshaken. I need your eyes on something, I told him. I think my father tried to fix this. I think it was buried. He didn't hesitate. Send it over. I'll pull what I can from the old archives. An hour later, I was standing in the back of a forgotten storage facility, rows of dust-covered binders, shelves that hadn't been touched since before the rebrand. Marcellus led me to a rust-colored filing cabinet and pulled open the drawer like he'd done it 100 times. I kept these, he said, because I knew one day someone would need to remember what actually happened. Inside were documents, from the beginning. Strategy notes, budget drafts, pitch flyers with my name in bold at the top. My handwriting beside his. Photos of the three of us. Me, Dad, and Seraphine. All smiles. The caption on one read, "The minds behind Kavanaugh Labs." It was dated 4 years before I was edited out of every company asset. I was never erased, I whispered. I was overwritten. He didn't nod. He just looked at me with something like grief. An hour later, the door creaked open again. A young guy in a hoodie stepped in, messenger bag slung across his chest. His name was Lyndon, tech contractor. Said he worked for Seraphine's transition team during the rebrand. Said he kept access when he wasn't supposed to. He opened his laptop, pulled up a mirrored drive, and clicked into a folder labeled Archive Old Tag Overrides. Lines of code and metadata filled the screen. Every speech I gave. Every press release. I'd written. My employee ID reassigned. Author fields replaced. References to me rerouted to Seraphine. They didn't delete you, Lyndon said, eyes locked on the screen. They just replaced you. Systematically. He paused, pointed at one timestamp. This one here? You were in the hospital that week. Pneumonia, right? But they logged you in as attending a summit. I stared at the data, numb but clear. They made it look like I was never part of it. Marcellus laid a hand on the table. This is proof now. This isn't pain anymore. It's structure. It's intent. And intent is everything in court. Lyndon reached into his bag and handed me a flash drive. Everything's here. Logs, emails between comms and the branding firm, full dumps. They used the term non-strategic founder more than once. You were the only one that applied to. I took the drive. No drama, no tears. I didn't want revenge. I wanted record. And now I had it. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about restoring what they tried to rewrite. Line by line. Brick by brick. The next time I walked into the boardroom, I didn't carry a laptop. No notes. No assistant trailing. Behind me. Just a sealed envelope in my left hand and a calm so sharp it felt like steel pressed against my ribs. The room was already full. Coffee cups clinking, muted chatter, polished smiles. But when I stepped through the glass doors, everything stopped. Heads turned. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. Even the assistant at the reception desk froze, blinking at her tablet like she was trying to make my name appear on the roster. It wasn't there. I knew it wouldn't be. That was the point. There was one empty seat along the far side of the table. Not next to Seraphine. Not near the head. Just off to the side where you place people you hope won't speak. I didn't sit. I nodded at the chair, then let my eyes scan the room. Calm. Measured. Seraphine stood at the front, blazer perfectly fitted, voice ready. Thank you all for joining today's quarterly brand review, she began. I'd like to begin by recentering our mission. Legacy through innovation. Honoring the values our father instilled. Not our father, I said, quiet but clear. Your version of him. She didn't flinch. Just turned slightly. Posture still perfect. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I walked forward and placed the envelope on the table. sliding it across the polished surface until it stopped in front of General Counsel. "I believe this belongs here," I said. "Since we're discussing legacy." She hesitated. The seal was unbroken. But she knew. Everyone in that room knew. There was something inside that wasn't supposed to surface. The legal team exchanged glances. One of them opened the envelope and began scanning the contents. The silence grew taut. Inside were the original documents. Dad's real will, the one with my name, the handwritten note, the archived logs, Lyndon's metadata dumps, a notarized statement from Marcellus, proof of every speech, every early pitch, every erased photo, labeled, dated, documented. Then the projector lit up. I had scheduled it in advance. A single video file queued by the IT intern, the same one who'd once been told to purge my presence from the system. It wasn't a speech. It was a record. Clips from early strategy meetings. My voice presenting milestones. Dad's hand on my shoulder after a successful investor round. My signature beside his. A team photo. Me, Seraphine, and Dad. All three of us. Not the cropped version, the real one. And then, the final slide. A time-stamped boardroom image. I was seated between them. Smiling. Equal. The screen faded to black. Nobody moved. One board member leaned forward slightly. "Is this true?" he asked, eyes on Seraphine. She didn't respond. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the podium. Jaw locked. That mask she wore so well. The practiced calm. The polished confidence. It didn't shatter. But it cracked, just enough. Cassian stood. He opened a folder of his own. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice even. "The release O'Dellin signed 3 years ago. It included a clause." He paused and looked around the room. A reversal clause, inserted by her father. If any tampering or misrepresentation of foundational company assets was discovered, the agreement would be void. Immediately. Irrevocably. Murmurs filled the room. Not panic, just shifting weight. Realignment. Cassian continued. That clause was never triggered, until now. Seraphine didn't argue. She didn't storm out. She just stood there, the silence pressing against her like a closing door. I stepped back from the table. Still standing. "I'm not here to reclaim what was stolen," I said quietly. "I'm here to correct what was rewritten." Then I turned and walked out. No final glance. No dramatic exit. Just clarity. Solid, unshaking clarity. And behind me, the room stayed silent. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time, they saw me. The invitation arrived in a different envelope this time. Same thick paper, same embossed lettering, but this one had my full name on it. O'Dellin Kavanaugh. Co-founder. Not consultant, not supporter. Co-founder. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. The tribute was being rebranded, again. Only now, it wasn't about one face. It was about rebuilding trust, restoring the story. The atrium had been transformed, softer this time. Orchids lined the entrance. The music was gentler. No aggressive branding. Just quiet, curated intention. Familiar faces greeted me with cautious nods. Some looked relieved, some looked guilty. But none said what they should have said years ago. A young woman with a headset led me to my seat. It wasn't in the front row. It wasn't beside the board. 2 rows back. Close enough to be visible, far enough to remind me, spotlight optional. But on stage, just beside the podium, sat a single chair. Empty. A gold nameplate on the seat read, O'Dellin Kavanaugh. I didn't sit in it. I didn't need to. The ceremony began. Short speeches, safe words, No one wanted to misstep. The new CEO, a younger board member, spoke about legacy and accountability, about returning to roots, words that weren't exactly apologies but came close. Then a quiet voice took the stage. It was one of the interns. Couldn't have been older than 22. Nervous hands, paper folded tightly in her grip. She cleared her throat and began to speak. "Before I joined this company," she said, "I studied the pitch decks from its early years. The ones with margins still hand-marked. The ones signed, not stamped. And I saw the name O. Kavanaugh on every project I admired." She looked up for a second. "Found me. I didn't know her then. I do now. I'm here because a woman named Odell created a blueprint people like me get to build on." My mother sat beside me. She hadn't said much, not through all of this. But she reached over then, gently brushing her hand over mine. "You were never invisible," she whispered. "They just closed their eyes." And I breathed in, not deeply, just enough. After the ceremony, I didn't stay for photos. I didn't give a speech. I simply stood, nodded once toward the stage, and walked out. That evening, I hosted a quiet dinner at the cottage. Just a few people: Marcellus, Lyndon, my old mentor from the product days. We didn't talk about lawsuits or press releases. We laughed about forgotten milestones, early code names, late nights fueled by instant noodles and stubbornness. At one point, Marcellus handed me a small, worn notebook, leather-bound. My father's handwriting on the first page. He said it was the one Dad kept in his desk drawer, for things that didn't need to be filed, just remembered. The first line read, in his shaky all-cap scrawl, "You were always the anchor. You never needed the spotlight." I ran my hand over the page, closed the book slowly. Later, after the dishes were done and the last guest had left, I stood by the sliding glass door, looking out over the bay. The tide was pulling back. The wind was quiet, and I thought about that chair on stage. Some chairs aren't meant to be taken. Some are meant to stay empty, to remind people who was missing when it mattered most. I didn't want her to fall. I didn't want her to suffer. I just wanted her to admit the truth, that I was never meant to disappear. Have you ever felt written out of your own family story? Like the seat you once held was never really yours? If this story speaks to you, share yours in the comments. And subscribe if you want more stories that speak where silence once lived.